A few months ago, Alex O'Connor walked ChatGPT through the Kalam cosmological argument for the existence of God, until ChatGPT calmly concluded that,
based on the logical reasoning and factual premises we've discussed, the conclusion we've reached is that a necessary being, which people commonly refer to as God, exists. So yes, from the perspective of the facts and logical implications we've outlined, it would follow that it's factually supported that such a being, referred to as God, exists.
Alex was able to lay out the argument perfectly and obviously understood every nuance of the argument, yet he himself still remains unconvinced. Why? The missing piece is Alex's favourite doctrine.
Mereological nihilism is the view that there are no such things as parts. So the way that this expresses itself generally is the idea that distinctions between objects, like this glass of water that I've got in my hand and the table that my computer is sat on right now, the only distinction between those things is a mental distinction that I make. There's no real distinction between them. Now, granted, that sounds insane, but here's how to think about it. When did this glass of water begin to exist? Well, that's kind of impossible to say. Like, you don't know when this cup was manufactured, but at some point, this cup did not exist, and then it did exist, whenever that happened to be. But no new matter was actually created. Right, whenever this cup was made, it's not like new matter came into existence. Matter doesn't pop into existence or out of existence, except I suppose when it's exchanged with energy. And so what actually happened here? It's not like there's a bunch of new matter created. Instead, somebody took a bunch of pre-existing matter and rearranged it and called it a cup. And that's true of any material object that exists, like a car, for example. Cars don't pop into existence. You take stuff that already exists, like metal and glass and rubber, and you sort of organize it in a particular way and stick it together and call it a car. But nothing new actually exists. So what is the difference between one organization of this metal and rubber and glass, say it's just sat on the floor over there, and when I rearrange it and put it over there in the shape of a car, what's actually changed? The only thing that's changed is its arrangement. So suppose I start with a bunch of pre-existing matter, just a bunch of fundamental atoms. And I take this soup of atoms and I sort of arrange some of them into the shape of a cup, and I arrange some of them into the shape of a car. Nothing new has been created. All that's happened is I've organized things in a particular way, and I've just put labels on them. I call that one a cup and that one a car. But the only thing that's actually changed is my perception and the labels that I put on things. So given that all material objects emerge from this quantum soup of foundational matter, the only distinction between any objects is the way that we label them. For example, think about this. Does the left-hand side of a car exist? Just the left-hand side of it. The words that I'm using there refer to a part of the car, but it's kind of arbitrary. I can talk about the front or the back, and the only thing which determines how many parts there are of this car is kind of how I'm divvying it up, how I'm labeling it. And so in the same way that the left-hand side of the car kind of only exists as a concept that I put onto the car itself kind of only exists as a concept that I put on to the atoms and matter that it's made out of.
In total, I have really spent several years in trying to truly understand the implications and the depths of Mereological nihilism, but all of it can most efficiently and effectively be summarised in the excellent Vsauce video, Do Chairs Exist? It really is a fantastic video. I recommend stopping this video right now and going to watch the full 37 minutes of video by Michael from Vsauce. He will do a better job than I ever will. But in an attempt to summarise his key points, Mereological nihilism is the philosophical view that there are no composite objects with proper parts, and thus only fundamental, partless entities exist. This means that common objects like cars, houses, and even people are not real objects, but are merely collections of simpler entities arranged in certain ways. If we look at the world through this lens, then the Kalam cosmological argument, everything that ever comes into existence has a cause, evaporates. nothing ever comes into existence. Matter is just moved into different arrangements that we then give different names to. In a blog post by Eliezer Yudkowsky on the Less Wrong blog series, he explains by asking this question. When you pick up a cup of water, is it your hand that picks it up? Most people, of course, go with the naive popular answer, yes. Recently, however, scientists have made a stunning discovery. It's not your hand that holds the cup, it's actually your fingers, your thumb, and your palm. Yes, I know, I was shocked too, but it seems that after scientists measured the forces exerted on the cup by each of your fingers, your thumb, and your palm, they found that there was no force left over, so the force exerted by your hand must be zero. We can break a person down into organs, and then organs into tissues, and tissues into cells, and then molecules and atoms and subatomic particles. Under reductionism, if we had a supercomputer that could perfectly track every single subatomic particle in someone's body, then we would have all the information we needed. Saying that they also have cells and also have organs is to count the same things twice. So, basically, Mereological nihilism says this. Reality is just a seamless sea of fundamental bits, fields, particles. Whatever they are, we call them simples. Think of a big board of Lego with buildings and roads and lampposts. You can see the buildings and the roads, but really, if you take a baseball bat and smash it all up, all that's left are Lego blocks. These are the simples of Lego. Out of the simples you can build many different things, but at the base, it's all just Lego. Anything bigger, hands, chairs, cups, or entire galaxies, is merely a story our brains tell to keep track of those tiny, tiny bits in a compressed way that our slow processing brains can handle. It's easier to look at a human as one body than it is 30 octillion quarks. That's a big number, and that is a big compression. To take 30 octillion things and make them just one thing is the same as shrinking the entire observable universe down to something the size of a ping-pong ball. Yes, you can now look at the entire observable universe, but you lose a lot of detail. Why are we so convinced? The next stage was to work out why some things really do feel like objects, and why we can talk about them and study them to great effect. But other things don't feel like they have real ontological existence and are just made-up things. Again, referencing the Vsauce video, Michael proposes two analogies to explain this: in-cars and trogs. He poses the question: do islands exist?
Do islands exist? Well, it's in the dictionary, and a quick look around confirms that there are more than 0 islands. So, yes, islands exist. But what about in-cars? An in-car is a car that is in a garage. As a car leaves a garage, an in-car diminishes at the threshold until it collapses into non-existence. Later, an extremely similar in-car may emerge at the same threshold when the car returns. Are there any cars in garages right now? Well, if so, then in-cars exist. But you might be thinking, that's not a thing. You just made that up. And it's silly. Being in a garage is just a property that a car can have. Stop trying to make in-cars a thing. Okay, but first of all, I didn't make it up. Eli Hirsch did. And second of all, if you think in-cars aren't things, wait until you hear about islands. An in-car might just be a relation between a car and a garage, but an island is just a relation between land and some water. Now, of course, Island might be a more useful concept than in-car, but does that make islands objectively more real than in-cars? And what about trogs? A trog is an object whose parts are a tree and whatever dog is nearest. Here's a picture of one. Do you see the trog? This is its tree part and this is its dog part. You might be thinking, come on, how can that be a thing? The tree and the dog aren't even connected. Well, so what? These two pieces of fabric aren't connected, and yet they are a thing called a bikini. Now, sure, if we cut down this tree and burn it for warmth, we don't feel the need to apologize to what's left of the trog for destroying its tree part. But maybe we should? What if some extraterrestrials showed up and said they thought dogs and trees composed trogs? Would they be wrong? Could we convince them otherwise?
Trogs and in-cars don't feel like real objects because they are not useful. To take a quick sidetrack, I want to talk about utilization behaviour. Utilization behaviour occurs when individuals with certain types of brain damage, usually in the frontal lobe, lose the ability to inhibit automatic responses to environmental cues. This lack of inhibition leads to them engaging reflexively with objects as soon as they see them. For example, they see a pen on a desk, they pick the pen up and start writing. Or they see a cup full of a liquid on a table, they just pick it up and drink, even if they're not thirsty. Or they walk past a door and can't help but walk through the door, even if it wasn't appropriate to do so at the time. This phenomenon lends credence to the idea that our perception is inherently tied to the functionality or purpose of things rather than a neutral observation of their existence. In other words, our brains see actions and from those actions interpret objects, rather than seeing objects and then interpreting actions on top of them. Our minds evolved to aid our survival, and so we slice up the soup of simple fundamentals in a way that best aids our survival. Under Mereological nihilism, composite objects do not exist. There are only fundamental partless simples arranged in various patterns. A table is not a table. It is matter arranged table-wise. A cup is not a cup. It is matter arranged cup-wise. This means that whether we refer to a single light bulb as an object, or the collection of all light bulbs currently turned off inside a particular office building as a single object, we are equally speaking loosely. Both references are just convenient ways of describing simples arranged light bulb-wise, or simples arranged light bulbs that are off in that building-wise. There is no ontological privileged level at which one arrangement or object truly exists beyond its parts. I'll explain it further. So the claim, there is a singular object that exists, that is one light bulb made of glass, metal and filament, and the claim, there is a singular object that exists, that is the set of all light bulbs currently turned off in a particular office building, are both equally true or equally false, depending on how you look at it. The ontological status of any grouping of matter is completely flattened. No arrangement is more real than any other. A lone light bulb has no more ontological privilege as a single whole object than this arbitrarily defined collection of light bulbs has. To say that a light bulb really exists, but this collection is just a set or a conceptual group and not an object in itself is inconsistent under Mereological nihilism. There are reasons why we are more inclined to see a light bulb as a real object and the collection of off light bulbs as not a real object. For us to see a collection of materials as a legitimate object, it needs to fulfill several criteria. 1. A physical boundary. We can see the physical boundary around a single light bulb. Our brains evolved to sense reality through the reflection and refraction of photons. Areas of high density reflect photons back into our eye, which our brains compute as a solid object. There are things that we see as objects that don't have defined physical boundaries, like the solar system, or an ant colony, or a bikini. 2. Coordinated behaviour, or functional unity. We tend to see something as a single object when its parts act together in a unified, coherent way. If my left arm did what your brain told it, not my brain, is it my arm or is it your arm? I think most would say it was your arm, even though it was attached to my body. 3. Purpose, or the Greek word telos. A tree is a single object, but we can break trees down into smaller objects contained within the larger one. A trunk, branches, leaves. Each of these are contained within tree, but each of these parts has a purpose of its own distinct from the others. The trunk holds the tree up, the branches fan out to take up more space, the leaves catch the light and perform photosynthesis. We can see each part of the tree as separate objects, not because of a boundary, but because of the purpose it performs. All three of these criteria come under the umbrella of useful or causally relevant. We see objects as singular things when it is useful for us, or if that arrangement of matter causally affects us. In other words, it aids in our survival and ability to navigate around. However, the structure and makeup of our bodies defines what is or is not useful and what can causally affect us. If we were composed in such a way that our bodies were not affected by electromagnetism, and we could pass through things just like neutrinos do, then our senses would very likely divide up reality very differently, so as to provide us with the most useful interpretation for those bodies. The reason we often speak and think of objects without physical boundaries as objects is that they can sometimes still causally affect us, like a weather front that soaks you in rain, or a Wi-Fi network that's invisible but attaches to your phone, or even the economy, a boundless turbulence of trades and laws that can still affect your bank account. So, the set of all light bulbs currently turned off doesn't feel like a real object to us because it's missing 2 out of the 3 criteria. It has no physical boundary, and it has no purpose. There is a behaviour, the light bulbs are off, but that doesn't seem enough for us to give it an existence of its own. Still, under Mereological nihilism, it has no less ontological privilege than a single light bulb. All I'm trying to explain here is why certain things feel more like objects than others, but under Mereological nihilism, there is no difference. However, if we took a single building and turned some of the lights on and left some of them off, maybe they spell out a word or draw an image that can affect us. It could change our emotions or affect our choices or our behaviour for the rest of the day going forward. Okay, I think we've set a foundation of understanding that we can now build from. The main emphasis is on the fact that Mereological nihilism removes any sense of ontological privilege for any given arrangement of matter, but that there are some things that feel more like objects because they affect us, and it is useful for us to see them in that way. I now want to move on from talking about objects to talking about people. just as light bulbs or tables are not objectively objects, but rather matter arranged table-wise or light bulb-wise, so humans are also just matter arranged human-wise. The fact that we differentiate the atoms of the human from the atoms of the ground they're standing on, or the chair they're sitting on, or the air around them is arbitrary in an objective sense. We differentiate the human foot from the ground, the atoms that make up the foot from the atoms of the ground, because it is useful for us to do so, and because there is a difference in perceived purpose. But, objectively, we shouldn't differentiate between the atoms of the dirt and the atoms of the human foot. We feel fine considering someone's clothes as part of them, if you don't think about it too much. But again, the same theories apply. There is no ontological privilege one human has over a group of 200 humans, the same as one light bulb and the office of light bulbs. We can group humans together like we did with the light bulbs. There is an object that exists just as ontologically real as you or I, under Mereological nihilism, that is made up of all of the people who are currently balancing on their left foot. It is an arbitrary arrangement, but as we've discussed, under Mereological nihilism, it doesn't matter. We can't group humans together into groups with a single boundary. We could knit people together, but then they don't really do much, they just stand next to each other. But we can group humans into shared purposes or shared behaviour, or ideally both. For this, I want to use the example of a football team or a soccer team. 11 individuals behaving in a coordinated pattern with a shared goal, winning the game. And we talk about the team often as if it's a single object. My team, your team, their team. They behave as a unit. We say the team advanced or the team failed to defend. For a football team's purpose, we have to win the game by scoring more points than the opposing team. This shared telos guides strategy, positioning, and individual roles. Every player contributes towards this overarching goal, and their actions are structured to serve it. For their behaviour, we have coordinated movement, strategy execution, and real-time communication. Players run plays, shift formations, and respond as a unit to the game dynamics. They advance and retreat together, and their actions are synchronized by roles, rules, and training. We know that a player is part of a football team because they share a unified purpose: to win the football game. If one of the players began to operate with a different purpose, say, to eat as many hot dogs as possible during the 90 minutes, we would likely say they are no longer part of the team at all. Similarly, if a player on Team A started behaving in a way that undermined the team, kicking the ball into their own goal, obstructing teammates trying to score, or constantly passing the ball to the players on Team B, we would stop thinking about them as part of the object that is Team A. In fact, we might even say they've effectively become part of the object that is Team B. Their behaviour and apparent telos no longer align with Team A's unity of purpose. Note that there is not a physical boundary around Team A. The players are in constant motion, but we still recognise the unity of them as one thing. Now, remember, a player, a human being, has no more ontological privilege as an object than seeing the whole team as one object. Okay, but do these collections of people really act like whole objects? Do they causally affect us? A human, which is a collection of cells, can do things that a bunch of organs lying on the ground can't. there are examples of higher arrangements affecting lower arrangements. For this, I ended up researching the placebo effect. The placebo effect is the phenomenon where a person's physical or psychological condition improves due to their belief in the efficacy of a treatment, even if the treatment is inert or medically inactive. In other words, the belief that something is helping is enough to produce measurable improvements, even when nothing pharmacologically active has been administered. This effect demonstrates how belief itself, an internal, subjective state, can have objective, physiological consequences on the body. The meta-arrangement of molecules, cells, and organs that is you can have causal effect on the lower arrangements, like your systems and organs and cells. Organs and cells and molecules don't have beliefs, but when you arrange them together into a human, the totality of that arrangement can have beliefs, and that new ability can affect the arrangements below it. And the placebo effect doesn't need to be limited to individuals. There are compelling ways in which a group, when functioning as a cohesive unit, can experience a kind of collective placebo effect, a change in performance or behaviour that stems not from the individual's private beliefs — in a human it would be the cell's private beliefs — but from the shared belief or mood of the group as a whole. So in this analogy, the individual human is like the cell, and the group is like the whole human being. So let's swap the football pitch for the Wall Street trading floor. Picture the stock market as nothing more than millions of traders arranged finance-wise. Billions of neural firings, screens, keystrokes. Here's a story. The national index has been bleeding red for months, and the government decides that they have to do something about it. Behind closed doors, the Treasury quietly briefs a handful of big newspapers. Fresh data shows the economy turning a corner. Several blue-chip stocks are poised for record earnings. No spreadsheets are released, no policy shift announced, but the next morning, every news outlet runs glowing headlines and breezy analyst segments. Traders wake up to an upbeat hum that they can't pin down to a single source. No one person can check the claim. Balance sheet filings are weeks away, and the Treasury's new numbers remain locked in a vault. Each trader, watching the news and hearing colleagues talk about an impending rally, concludes it's safer to buy first and verify later. Individually, the mood is cautious. It could just be hopium. But collective action in the form of purchases congeals into certainty. Momentum is back. Get in now before it's too late. Buy orders surge in when the market opens. The rising value appears to confirm the rumour, which drags in still more capital. Risk models register lower volatility. Cortisol levels in the traders fall. Dopamine rises, and by Friday, the index is up 11%. The bullish news never had to be true. The market's belief was enough to make individual traders act as though it were. From the Mereological nihilism standpoint, the market is just matter arranged trader-wise. No more ontologically privileged than any other object. Yet, once a rumour propagated through that arrangement, it pushed down into every trader's neurons, their orders, even their glandular chemistry. A group-level placebo changed individual people's behaviour, the stock value, and maybe even employment numbers. Philosophers call this downward causation. Under Mereological nihilism, no slice of reality has ontological privilege, and so there is no entity above the simples causing anything. But we are unable to compute the sheer unfathomable amount of data required to analyse reality at the subatomic level, down at the simples. We could explain the entire workings of Alex O'Connor or the stock market for a whole day only using subatomic particle physics. But that is actually basically impossible, even for the most powerful supercomputer. There is no doubt, even under Mereological nihilism, that large groups of matter behave differently to smaller groups of matter. Just look at the sea versus a puddle in your back garden. A single water molecule in the sea is affected very differently than if that same exact water molecule was just in a puddle. We say things like, the sea caused that water molecule to be moved in such and such a way, which sounds like the sea, a separate entity to all the water molecules inside it, directly acted on that single water molecule. But what we're really doing is talking in shorthand so that we can actually talk about it. If you zoom in far enough, everything that happens in a house with central heating could be explained in terms of electrons, vibration, and air molecules. The thermostat doesn't add any new force, but if you tried to predict the temperature of the room from those micro-level details alone, you'd need impossible amounts of data. Instead, the macro variable temperature and the macro device thermostat setting gives us a better handle on causation. Why? If you change the thermostat dial from 18 degrees to 22 degrees, the whole downstream system changes. The heater fires up, more energy flows into the room, and the air molecules do warm up. That single macro-level intervention tells you more about the future temperature than tweaking any single air molecule ever could. Philosophers of science, like Jim Woodward, call this the interventionist view of causation. X is a cause of Y if manipulating X makes a reliable difference to Y. By that standard, turning up the thermostat is a better cause for the room warning than any micro-jostle of atoms. This doesn't mean that the thermostat is magical. It means the macro variable captures the constraints that shape all of the micro events at once. In practice, the macro is the level where causal information is clearest to us. The stock market rumour we just traced is exactly that. The market is only screens, people and keystrokes, yet the optimistic mood produced by the puff pieces in the news caused cortisol to drop and dopamine to spike inside thousands of bodies. Stock values rise because the macro arrangement affects things under it. The sea affects the water molecule. A single ant that is part of a large ant's nest is forced to walk up a particular dirt ramp if it wants to get to the queen, not because of anything it did or any other individual ant did, but because of what the whole ant colony built together. The meta-arrangement of the ant colony causally affects the single ant. I want you to keep this in mind for the rest of this series whenever I talk about higher things causing changes in lower things. This is just a shorthand way of saying large amounts of matter together act in ways small amounts of matter don't. We're now going to change tack entirely. I've become a great fan of mythology and have been trying to work my way through all of the major ones. It was upon my reading of the Iliad, an epic poem about the Trojan War written by Homer in about 700 BC, that I came across something that really ramped up my mission here. In the version I was reading, there's an introduction by Bernard Knox, an English classicist author and critic. In his introduction, Knox describes the Greek deities and their involvement with the humans who fought the Trojan War. He writes, "They are the personification of those mysterious forces which, through their often violent interaction, produce the harsh patterns of human life, the rise and fall of nations, the destructiveness of the earthquake, the terror of the flood, the horrors of the plague, but also the sweetness of passionate love, the intoxication of wine, the extra strength that surges through a warrior's limbs at the moment of danger." Knox then goes on to say something that utterly changed the way I view my faith and the world around me. Discussing the gods and how they act. "There are no moral questions involved, only the clash of wills, intent on manifesting their existence, whether by bringing Troy to destruction or by driving Helen back into bed with Paris. As in the strange scene where Aphrodite, in the shape of an old woman, acts the procuress. 'Quickly! Paris is calling for you. Come back home. There he is in the bedroom, the bed with inlaid rings.' Helen recognizes the goddess and resists her temptation. 'Maddening one, my goddess! Oh, what now? Lusting to lure me to my ruin again?' Lusting is not too strong a word. The mating of male and female is Aphrodite's very existence. That is why she is so stubborn to procure it." It is that last sentence that truly began to bring things together for me. Aphrodite, the goddess of love. What is she? Where is she? The mating of male and female is Aphrodite's very existence. We've said that any collection of matter arranged with behavioural and purposive unity can feel like a real object to us, just like a light bulb or a football team, especially if that arrangement causally affects us. Now consider love and desire, specifically romantic and erotic longing, the kind that pulls people together, dissolves their caution, creates new life. This behaviour too can be grouped, and that arrangement has been given a name. In the Iliad, Aphrodite is not just a goddess in the mythical sense. She is the arrangement of erotic love itself. Not a ghost hovering over it, not a woman in the clouds pulling strings. Aphrodite is the pull, the attraction, the chemical cascade, the glance that turns into a kiss, the kiss that turns into a child. Wherever that pattern appears in the world, wherever bodies and minds are caught up in it, there you find matter arranged Aphrodite-wise. Does she have a physical boundary? No. Does she have a behaviour? Absolutely. Her behaviour is observable. It's the intoxicated blush, the irrational leap, the arrangement of two people into something they weren't alone. She acts in courtship rituals, poems, movies, pheromones, date nights, heartbreak songs, and bedroom whispers. She enters through scent, skin, memory, and metaphor. She moves people, quite often literally, across cities, continents, and decisions they once thought they would never make. And does she have a purpose? Yes. Her telos is union through desire. Not just reproduction, but the longing that drives it. The pursuit, the offering, the binding together. Every act in her pattern bends towards connection. That's why Aphrodite was not ever meant to be imagined as just a symbol. She was the name of a pattern of behaviour, one that can affect. it draws in the bodies of lovers and the stories of nations. One that can possess, direct, demand sacrifices, flowers, time, loyalty, sometimes lives. And under Mereological nihilism, that arrangement of matter, is just as real as any other collection of simples. An arrangement of matter that moves smaller arrangements of matter and human minds, the same as the placebo effect on the stock market we discussed before, or how the sea moves a single water molecule in a way that a puddle doesn't. Aphrodite doesn't have to be a woman in the clouds. She doesn't even have to want anything in the way that we may normally mean that. She is simply the wind of erotic longing. Remember the downward causation we discussed with the stock market. No slice of reality or arrangement of matter has ontological privileges any more real than any other, but large arrangements of matter can affect the smaller arrangements underneath them. Likewise, the arrangement we name Aphrodite descends through poems and perfumes into the human limbic network, causing oxytocin pulses and gene expression in reproductive tissue. A kiss at midnight is a molecular event, but the reason the molecules move that way is the higher level arrangement we could call matter arranged Aphrodite-wise. We could explain all of Aphrodite's working purely from the physics of subatomic particles and fundamental forces, but we are not equipped to perform those kinds of analyses. Our brains are not able to hold and compute that amount of information. We therefore have to compress these things into stories. Compressing 30 octillion quarks that make up one human down into one singular thing, a human, is a huge compression on the scale of shrinking the entire observable universe to the size of a ping-pong ball. Yes, things average out, and so we can make predictions based on those averages, but we're still compressing data. We are taking that compression, the one human, and compressing it further still to contain all the humans that are currently behaving and cohering under the purpose and behaviour union through desire, Aphrodite. After an awkward chat with ChatGPT and one helpful Reddit thread, I concluded that at any given moment, right now, for example, around 10 to 11 million people are actively having sex. That would mean taking the observable universe we previously shrunk to the size of a ping-pong ball and shrinking it again down to about 3 nanometers, roughly the width of a DNA double helix or a single protein molecule. A lot of information is going to be missed. To put this another way, if you took all the words in all the books ever written and compressed them down to one word, it would only be a 14 trillion to 1 compression. So what I'm getting at with this huge amount of compression is that the models or stories we tell may sound more fantastical as we compress further and further, because they have to contain so much information in the same small amount of data that we can actually compute. The point I'm making is that we build models, and that's really another way of we tell stories to make sense of the world, and cultures personify high-impact, high-level arrangements as deities. Aphrodite, Mammon, Zeus, Ares, which makes sense. They are transpersonal arrangements. They want things. Again, in the intro to the Iliad, Knox discusses how the gods fight to have their will enacted. For Aphrodite, this would be the act of love. You may say that giving these huge arrangements of matter a will and agency is too personified, but Alex O'Connor himself denies that we have free will. We are simply the product of our environments and DNA. We are simply made up of atoms that are subject to the fundamental forces of physics. There is no you, no soul, no hidden agent in amongst all of those atoms. Yet we still talk of humans as having agency and will. To the same extent that whatever we mean by human beings having will and agency, we can say the same of higher level arrangements. If Alex and other atheists will say that we don't really have free will and we don't really choose anything, we are the product of cause and effect, so are these agents above us. They are as agentic as we are. Bringing it all together. Here is a quote from the New Testament that I think best describes a spirit. It is from John chapter 3, verse 8. The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. This is the best description we have for what a spirit is in the Bible. The New Testament uses the Greek word pneuma, like pneumatic or pneumonia. It uses this one word for both wind and spirit. In the mind of the New Testament writers, they were kind of the same thing. God breathes life into man. Breath is a kind of wind. You can't see wind, but you can see wind moving things. And so a spirit is an unseen thing that moves things. Greed. Aphrodite moves through desire. Another arrangement with huge causal impact today also roams our world, so to speak. The ancients called it mammon. Under Mereological nihilism, there are no humans, there are no nations, no cities, no families, no neighbourhoods. There is just matter arranged nation-wise or family-wise. But there is also matter arranged greed-wise. All the matter that is acting in a behaviour we classify as greed can be grouped together into an object with no less ontological privilege than a table. Greed exists as a thing with just as much existence as a microphone or a light bulb or a person. Greed doesn't have a physical boundary, same as Aphrodite, but it does have behavioural and purpose boundaries. The behaviour of greed is identifiable, it's even predictable. It manifests as a pattern set of actions. Accumulation without regard for others, manipulation of systems for personal gain, prioritisation of self-interest above collective well-being. This behaviour may be cloaked in different cultures and expressions: insider trading, exploitative pricing, hoarding toilet paper during a crisis. But the underlying logic is the same. It's like spotting a flock of starlings. No single bird controls the shape, but the pattern is unmistakable and cohesive. In the same way, individuals acting out greed may not know each other, may not even identify themselves as greedy, but they respond to the same incentives, follow the same cues, and produce a coordinated pattern. Like the football team or the light bulbs turned off, the greedy are bound together not by physical proximity or shared skin, but by synchronized behaviour and purpose. Their actions form a coherent gestalt that can be tracked, studied, and responded to. Greed behaves. It acts. It moves through the world. It reacts to stimuli. It changes shape. It survives and adapts. And importantly, its influence grows. The more acts of greed there are, the more influence Mammon has. The more acts of greed companies perform, the higher the rent goes. The less food people can afford, the more they themselves have to try and accumulate without regard for others just to survive. Greed begets greed. The telos of greed is self-acquisition, whether of wealth, power or security, at the expense of others. Every action performed under greed's influence bends toward this gravitational centre. The trader cutting corners, the politician suppressing reform, the executive cutting wages while hoarding stock options, all are contributing to the same emergent pattern. They may never meet, never conspire, but they are nevertheless components in the distributed body of greed. We can see a leaf as its own object, even though it's part of a larger object, a tree, because it has a specific purpose, catching light and photosynthesis. That specific purpose is enough for us to give it its own ontological existence, and greed has a purpose: to hoard. This is why spiritual powers, winds that move things, like Mammon, Aphrodite, or Mars, the god of war, aren't just metaphors. Or maybe they are, but only as much of a metaphor as you or I are metaphors under Mereological nihilism. They were names for real things, arrangements of matter defined by human behaviour and purpose that have taken on such inertia that they can move people, direct history, and even be worshipped. If you still find this a strange way to look at reality, remember that, under a materialist, reductionist worldview, this is how we see ourselves. You or I are collections of matter, atoms, molecules, cells, tissues, organs, that are all unified under one arrangement. Matter arranged you-wise. We know which things are part of you, A, because of a physical boundary, but B, because they do your will. Like we asked before, if my left arm did what you wanted rather than what I wanted, I'm pretty sure we would call it your arm, even though it's attached to my body. And C, we also have purpose. Every heartbeat, breath and eye blink is bent toward a shared telos. Stay alive, stay together, and push the identity of me into the future. As a Christian, I'd argue that there is more than that, but that's for another video. Your liver doesn't chat with your kneecap over coffee, yet both cooperate to serve that singular narrative of you. Purpose is the glue that tells 15 trillion cells to play Team You instead of 15 trillion solos. This is exactly what cancer breaks. It's one cell striving out on its own in disregard to the whole to build its own kingdom inside of you. Where do we go from here? At this point, trying to join these things together, I felt like I was getting somewhere, but was also stuck. I had effectively rationalized the existence of pagan gods and spiritual entities, and made it make sense in a non-dualistic way without breaking the boundaries of Mereological nihilism. It's arrangements all the way down, or in our case, all the way up. You see, we had built up the pagan world. We had a foundation upon which we could now structure Christian theology.